Today, we're diving into the story of one of ancient Rome's greatest enemies. A king whose life was so absolutely wild, it ended in a paradox that's almost too perfect to be true. This is the story of Mithridates VI, the man who couldn't be poisoned. These are his own reported last words, right at the very end. Can you believe that? He spent his entire life building an immunity to every poison he could find, only to be brought down by something he never saw coming. Betrayal from inside his own circle. It's just a stunning, unbelievably ironic end to an epic life.
So that's the big question, right? Who was this guy, and how does someone become immune to poison? Well, to figure that out, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning, to a childhood that was basically defined by it. And this is really where it all kicks off. His obsession, his paranoia, his ambition, all of it was forged in the fires of a seriously traumatic youth, where poison was the weapon of choice for his enemies. The trauma hits him hard, and it hits him early. Picture this. He's just a boy when his father, the king, is poisoned and killed at a banquet. Then his own mother, Laodice, takes over and starts plotting against him. He's forced to go into hiding in the wilderness for years just to survive. So when he finally comes back, he's this hardened young man who just takes the throne and imprisons his mother and brother, the very people who were supposed to protect him. This experience is the key to understanding everything else about him. And here he is, Mithridates VI of Pontus. He would go on to rule for 57 years, and in that time, he'd become one of Rome's most relentless and dangerous foes. But his greatest legacy? It wouldn't actually come from the battlefield. No, it would be this, mithridatism. See, haunted by what happened to his dad, he started this lifelong obsession with poisons. He'd take tiny, non-lethal doses of different toxins every single day, slowly, methodically building up an immunity. So you have to understand, this wasn't just some scientific curiosity for him. This was a survival tactic, born directly out of that childhood trauma. So let's shift gears a bit. How did this paranoid, poison-proof king use all that drive and ambition? Well, he channeled it into building a massive empire that would go head-to-head with Rome itself. You can really see the scale of his ambition when you look at a map like this. The lighter area is the kingdom he started with, but the darker area, that's all the territory he conquered. He built this huge empire that dominated the whole Black Sea region, putting him right on Rome's doorstep. And, that kind of expansion put him on a direct collision course with the other superpower of the day, the Roman Republic. They were both expanding, both aggressive, and that part of the world just wasn't big enough for the two of them. His solution? He decided he was going to kick the Romans out of Asia for good. And that brings us to this number. Just let it sink in. 80,000. That's the estimated number of Roman men, women, and children who were slaughtered in a single day across dozens of cities, all on his command. It was a shocking, brutal event that we now call the Asiatic Vespers, and it basically served as a declaration of all-out war with Rome. Rome, of course, was furious, and they responded with everything they had. What happened next was this decades-long war that pitted Mithridates against some of Rome's most legendary generals. His first major opponent was the infamous Lucius Cornelius Sulla. So this wasn't just a war between empires anymore. It became a series of personal duels against Rome's very best. And this conflict just raged on and on for over 25 years, across 3 major wars. First, he fought Sulla, then a guy named Murena. Finally, he went up against 2 of Rome's titans, Lucullus and Pompey the Great. And what's so incredible is that even when Rome managed to beat him, he'd just retreat, rebuild his armies, and come right back for more. The man was unbelievably resilient. But in the end, even his incredible resilience wasn't enough. And that brings us to the final, unbelievably dramatic chapter of his story, where the one poison he could never prepare for finally found him. So after getting completely crushed by Pompey the Great, Mithridates, who was an old man by this point, refuses to surrender. He makes this insane trek across the Caucasus Mountains all the way to Crimea and immediately starts planning one last desperate gamble, an invasion of Italy itself. But this final plan, it was just too much. His armies were exhausted, his people had had enough, and the one who ends up leading the rebellion against him? You guessed it, his own son, Pharnaces, the very man he'd been grooming to take over the kingdom.
So there he is, an old king trapped in his fortress, not by the Romans, but by his own son's army. Seeing no way out, he turns to the one thing he'd studied his entire life. He gathers what's left of his family, and he takes poison.
And here it is, the ultimate irony. It didn't work. His daughters died, but the poison had absolutely no effect on him. The very practice he had developed for decades to save his life now prevented him from ending it. He was, quite literally, too toxic to die by poison. You just can't make this stuff up. So unable to die by his own hand, he's forced to ask his loyal bodyguard and friend, a man named Mithridates, to kill him with a sword. And that's how it ended. The incredible 57-year reign of Mithridates the Great. Not by a Roman soldier, not by a dose of arsenic, but by a friend's blade. A death made necessary by the betrayal of his own son.
It really leaves us with a fascinating question, doesn't it? Was this man a hero, a freedom fighter standing up against Roman tyranny? Or was he a paranoid, ruthless king who massacred thousands and was ultimately consumed by the same kind of betrayal he'd inflicted on his own family? You know, the truth is, he was probably both.